Flooding. According to Nigeria's National Emergency Management Agency, this year's floods have affected something in the region of 27 of Nigeria's 36 states. We've counted fatalities, we've counted displacements running into about 1 million or thereabout, or more than 1 million. We've recorded losses of property, losses of lives, most unfortunately, and humanitarian contributions have been coming from various places. Communities like Madu, Ganare, Gwange, Dala, Angomari, Dusuma, Zabarmari, Damari in Maiduguri, and Jere local government areas have seen their houses flooded by the heavy waters, leading to displacement of many residents. And that's just talking about that one. Of course, we know what's happened in Kogi, it's happened in Delta, in Bayelsa, all over the nation, even in River State and the rest of them. And most certainly, there are a good number of people who have different stories to tell. Governors of the Northeast have raised the alarm over the influx of bandits from the Northwest region to the Northeast, and they are urging the federal government to urgently launch a security strategy to tackle the growing threats. You see it's a whole network of activities happening here and there. This is not without understanding the fact that we knew, according to the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, that we would have more floods in this year than the previous year, given reasons to be excessive rainfalls and contributions from external flows, such as the dam in Cameroon. Of course, if you caught the news, you know what the Minister of Water Resources said on that. They blame this year's flooding on water overflowing from some local rivers, unusual rainfalls, and the release of excessive water from Lagdo Dam in neighboring Cameroon's northern region. All of that is packed into this conversation, the devastating effect, how we could have or can mitigate it going forward, and how do we get the lives of the people who have been affected really settled back. Joining us for this conversation this morning, we'll have a panel of 4. Wale Ogwade is a human rights activist. He joins us here in the studio. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
We have an environmentalist and the person of town planner Sonny Adamo in our Abuja studio. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I appreciate you. We also have 2 people join us virtually. The Commissioner for Environment in Kogi State, Victor Omofaye, joins us along with Juliet Emudiange, who is Associate Professor, Federal University of Petroleum Resources, Efron in Delta State. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, let me begin with you, Mr. Ogwade. I don't even know where to begin. I mean, yesterday when we were having this conversation with the commissioner, an operative of the Ministry of the Environment in Lagos, we said this flooding thing has one thing or the other to do about human rights. And rightfully so, you are here, as a human rights person. One is wondering, is there anything that could have been done that we didn't do to protect the rights of the people in this act of God, as some people have put it?
So many. So many. But I'll lay my foundation on Section 14, 2B of the 1999 Constitution, which says, the welfare and the security of a people is the whole essence of government. So government has failed woefully. For me to establish the woeful failure of government in this regard, we have people, agencies, and authorities that will handle these issues, and they failed to do it. Rain did not just fall on us yesterday. Everyone knew that the rain will be coming. Of course, we all know that some of us are involved in issues of environment and all, and we know that the environment, the ozone layer, there are issues to the extent that the World UN body had a conference on it. African leaders went to New York to discuss it. And you know that there will be issues. We fly, we know how it is. Sometimes you fly in the cloud and you know how it is. Even let's leave it that you don't fly. You know that sometimes you just wake up, the weather has changed. And we know that even NIMET, let's leave international bodies, weather forecasts, have been making noise that the floods this year will be severe. The humanitarian body, ministry, the various agencies that are involved all went to sleep, drawing salaries. And here we had, they have debts on their hands.
Did they really go to sleep?
If they are not sleeping, what are we talking about?
Exactly, because
what are we talking about? These people they have not done anything.
There were advisories given out to people that this was going to happen.
Okay, you said they should leave their flood-prone area. Where will they go? I handled the matter for some people some time ago. The government agency just wrote that they should leave the place. I said, you are not serious. Why do you want them to go? When they were living and staying in that place and setting up as environment, your government, I told those people to bring receipts. Government was busy collecting money from them for one thing or the other, for land, for you know, these government issues now. They were busy collecting money.
But so, did they get, you know, building permits? Because that's another thing that's...
Building permits, some of them have building permits.
But some of them don't.
Some of them have. Yes, some of them don't, but some of them have. Okay. We wrote them and we said, you take steps and we'll ensure that we deal with the situation. They abandoned it. But that's not the issue. The issue is that people have started living in a place or staying in a place that is not convenient. You ensure that you make that place better for them. I'll give you an example. I'm sure you are old enough to know how Bar Beach is. 20, 30 years ago, there was the structure on Amadou Bello Way. Of course, if it floods like this, they are in trouble. But today, of course, the Nigerian Bar Association held its annual general conference inside Bar Beach. On that place, they now call it Atlantic City. So government can do that. So what stops government doing the Ekeremo? What comes doing the various places in Lokoja and all? What stops government?
Okay, we'll get to that. Thankfully, the Commissioner for the Environment in Kogi State is here. But before we go to him, let me ask TPL Sonny Adamu, who is in our Abuja studio. There are those who say that one of the issues that we have here, sorry, this is for our guests in Abuja, thank you. So there are those who say that, you know, the part of the issues that we're dealing with here is that of not giving attention to the planning of, you know, the city. Our guest in Lagos yesterday, who spoke from the Ministry of the Environment, told us that, look, there are floodplains that people shouldn't ever have built. He cited, you know, some floodplains like that in Lagos. Previously, in the course of the week, we also heard that there are areas, almost every area that's been flooded in this country today, they were floodplains that we thought were drylands. Is there any way we could have avoided the loss of lives and property here that we have experienced in this year, TPL Adamu, by complying with these things? At what point and how did we compromise these things?
Thank you very much, and good morning once again. Before I go, I would like to really, you know, commiserate with all the victims of this flooding in Nigeria. Like you pointed out, the issue of flooding and planning, they are interrelated. We have neglected planning in this country for so long. If people adhere to planning, if we avoid those flood-prone areas, you know, we will not be talking about the negative consequences of flooding. Perhaps we'll just be, you know, documenting these things as flood, but we'll not be talking about the losses in terms of, you know, social losses, physical and economic losses, you know, which result in human lives, loss in habitats, loss in economic investments, loss in relationships, and what have you. It is all bound down to planning. And planning is the only way. We must adhere to planning. When the town planners are preparing plans, these flood prone areas are respected. These flood prone areas are designated, and it is clear in every town that is planned. These are places that you cannot build on them because flooding is a natural disaster and it can come even if we are able to predict that at the end of so month or in so month there will be so much rain and there will be flooding. Are we going to say that we'll allow people to live in those places only for the flood to come and catch up with them?
But Mr.
And
Adamu,
then we will start talking about
Mr. Adamu,
mitigation strategies.
If you can hear me, there is
yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, there is that position by some governments, across the country, that some of these houses that are occupied by a good number of people, as you heard Mr. Okwade also confirm here, some of them have permits to build, permits and approvals to build on these floodplains. Some do not. Now, for those who do have these planning permits, approval permits to build in these floodplains, at what point, what would you say happened? Because I believe that there are some members of your association who are town planners, professional town planners like you, in the urban development departments of various agencies of government across Nigeria. So at what point did we frustrate that particular position?
Well, when you say someone has a plan or has an approved building plan for his building in a floodplain, I want to see such evidence because I know for a fact here in FCT, even if, we cannot say that no plan is perfect. We can make plans and, sometimes, we can make mistakes and sometimes things change. The topography, the terrain, and everything, it changes over time. That is why plans are subject to review. But there is no planner that can approve a building under floodplain. Like here in FCT, our plans are strictly, we respect floodplains and we don't allow development. Even if something happened in the offices, this is Nigeria, things can happen, things can go wrong, but there are always ways to remedy such things. That's why we have to continuously review our plans so that we take care of emerging situations.
Okay,
I'm not saying that the planners.
I'll come back to you, Mr. Adamu. Let's ask a government official, Mr. Omafaye, who is Commissioner for Environment in Kogi State, what his own experiences have been. Thank you again for joining us this morning, Mr. Omafaye. We want to give us an idea exactly what happened. We have heard comments all over the place from professionals that some of these houses that we're talking about, some of the areas that have been flooded, they are floodplains that shouldn't have been built upon in the first place if we had respected the fact that those are floodplains and they should not be inhabited by people. They looked like dry lands because they were dry at the point and people thought, okay, let's build there. But things are different now. Exactly what happened, what's the situation in Kogi State? You may want to unmute, please. We can't hear you right now. Can't hear you yet. You're talking. All right, we'll get back to you. Let's see if we can hear Professor Emudianke, who is okay. Is Professor Emudianke there with us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Associate professor, not professor.
Associate professor. Okay, well, we don't know the difference. Well, thank you so much again. First of all, what's your assessment of what is happening, as far as flooding is concerned, both for two ends now, from the side of the people and from the side of government? What do you think went wrong?
For me, thank you so much for the question. I think lack of planning. Government knew that we suffered flood 2012. And from 2012 till now, even if we have gone down on our agreements and all that as far back as 1980 or 1981, 2039 is enough time to have done something reasonable, to have put proactive measures in place. But in this country, we are very good at being reactive, not proactive. So I'm sure that's what has gone wrong. If we have put plans in place, even now we are doing a rescue mission, we are trying to bring the people out to a safe place and all that. Did we plan for that? No. So I'm sure on the part of the people, there are lots of suffering. Their palliative is being given, but if I are they enough, people are losing their homes, people are losing their health. People can't go to school, children can't go to school, parents can't go to work. So a lot is going on. On the part of the government, they are trying to do something now, but for me, that's a fire brigade approach. What can really get from a fire brigade approach? So on the side of the government, they stay totally in planning. Stay totally in planning. On the side of the people, a lot of suffering is taking place.
Well, as you rightly pointed out now, there are those who would say, look, it takes two to tango. So on the one hand, government hasn't done what it needs to do. Even if government planned, we have seen parts, even in this city of Lagos where I live, areas that are marked, no property should be erected and all of that. Before you know what is happening, it's already, things are being erected there. And there are those who say, as you have also heard Mr. Ogwade confirm here, there are areas that people built up without government approval. So would we say that government didn't do the right thing when government wasn't even aware in the first place?
I don't think that is the case now. You are referring to the urban areas. What about the villages? What about the villages? Are they built in wrong place? No. So I don't think that is the actual cause at the moment. So because in the villages, even the flood now is more in the villages than even in the urban areas. If you go to the villages, urban areas, some people are still living in their houses, some places are flooded, some people, but in the villages, some villages are totally submerged. Not because they built in the wrong direction and all that. So for me, for the people, yes, for people in the urban, they should obey government regulations. When they say don't build there, because some people go back and do some bribing and go ahead and build in that location, which is not supposed to be. But right now, even in the villages, that did not happen, but there's flood in the villages and they are suffering more in the villages. So for us as citizens, we should only obey government regulations. But even at that, government should do their part. If government has done its part, even if this flood comes, the effect will be very, very minimal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me try Mr. Mofaye again. If you can hear me, can you please confirm, Mr. Mofaye, that you can hear me now? We can't hear him yet. It's quite a crucial one. I hope we'll be able, if it is possible, you could sign out and then sign back in so that we can at least try.
And interest and the welfare of the people.
You're not also unaware of what happened in Lagos. This is not even a floodplain or anything.
Yes.
Government sealed the place off, and then this quote-unquote influential person went and opened it back.
That's what we are saying. That's what we are saying. Unfortunately, the man died. If he's not dead again, you can be sure that the whole thing will be buried. If not because the man died with that property, the thing will be buried. But before I forget, the professor made a brilliant submission.
Associate professor.
Associate professor, don't worry, she's a professor. I make her a professor by virtue of that submission. Wonderful submission. In law, we call it res ipsa loquitur. The fact speaks for itself. She was talking about, you are telling her that it's the urban. No! We are talking about lack of planning. The government did not plan. The villagers and the people in the farmlands are the victims of their plannedness. Let me get it, establish it. He was talking about, no, it's not only in the urban area, but in the villages and the rural areas. And they brought the film. It shows it smooth. Lawyers like us, that's what we want. That's what we call the weight of evidence. She cannot, no judge can move it. That this is not the truth. Now coming back, I want to appreciate her. So the issue here is that why, in the first instance, don't they do things? There are so many options. Open for government, dredging. You know that the place is that some place will be flood. Is a flood around. Ibadan, do you hear about Ogunpa again? They dredged the place when it became a problem. They dredge. You can do embankment, or as they did in what's it now, Atlantic City. You can construct canals, and of course, the most important thing, dams. Is it impossible to construct dams in all these places? If we had constructed at least in the last 20 years, each year one dam, leave the technicality that each year one dam in the last 20 years. We won't be talking about floods. Okay, for me to bury it, is it only Nigeria that rain falls? Why is it that it is only Nigeria that we are now the beneficiaries of the dam opening in Lando, in Cameroon, in Ghana, in Guinea?
It's not only in Nigeria that we've had this flooding. I saw a video of something that happened, was it in Peru or Singapore, where the flood...
I'm talking about our neighborhood now. We are the beneficiaries of the unplannedness of the government.
You are going into another conversation altogether, which is around, the conversation that should have happened between Nigeria and Cameroon. Did it happen? Is it significant? We'll come back to that. Let me try if Mr. Omofaye is with us now. Good morning, Mr. Omofaye. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good morning, Ayo.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. Kindly tell us, what the situation is in Kogi State at the moment. There are those who are wondering exactly, in your opinion, what happened.
Well, Ayo, as you know that the current happening is now becoming a global phenomenon. And so it's not peculiar to Nigeria, like you rightly said. And in Kogi State, we are having it so bad just because of the coming together of the two rivers, Niger and Benue. So that is why the level of devastation is so great here.
Okay.
And the destruction is massive.
Well, confirm this, because we had a guest who said, that a sizable number of the areas that are flooded in Kogi State, the confluence state, is because people thought the areas that looked like dry lands was dry. Rather, they were actually floodplains or, riverbeds that were dry at the point. Is that correct?
Yeah, I will agree to partially and disagree at the same time because we have in Kogi State about 10 local governments we are affected. And so by the time you look at this local government who are in the rural, we only have Lokoja, who is in the metropolis. And so we have a place like Ibaji. Ibaji is underwater completely. And so you cannot say because if you take Lokoja, for instance, who, of course, we know that we have some who built on the flood areas who ideally were not supposed to. Because going by, we have a Bureau of Land who always ensure that people were not, such places were not allocated in the first place. Such places were not allocated, and that is why we're always on them to see that they move.
But look
then
at it,
in the rural areas like Ibaji.
Just a second, Mr. Mafai. It is very, very disturbing looking at the videos that we saw previously where houses were submerged. We could see that the only thing that gave us a sign that there is a house there, look at it, is the roofs of the houses. Look at it. The roofs of the houses are the only signs that, so for how long has this been on? Because there are those who would say, okay, even if, just you heard Mr. Mr. Gwade say here, even if the people were there, illegally, couldn't, government have done something to, pull these buildings down, knowing the likelihood of such a thing happening?
I can tell you authoritatively that such buildings were marked already. They marked, and you now discover that our people, for example, the video you just saw is in Lokoja Metropolis. And I know quite well that Bureau of Land has gone there to mark those places. And aside that, Mr. Ayo, you discover that after the effect of 2012, there is a place where we call flood estate. That is where the state government has gone to build estates. And even there's a place we call flood hostels, where those places are for victims of 2012. We have been able to move them to that place. But of course, you know that by the time you go to these rural areas, we meet still resistance, because some of them believe that this is our ancestral home, and so we cannot leave. And you now discover that the whole place, for example, Ibaji, like I said, is underwater. It's not because these people, because they see dry land, that has been their home. It's their home right from time immemorial. And so by the time this flood comes, eventually, and don't forget the fact that Kogi State is always on the red alert, that we know. And that is why, as a state, we have a committee yearly who is always headed by the deputy governor, who in turn will see to, because under this committee, we have subcommittees. And so we have these plans, and that is why you have not, in the state, we have not experienced a high number of casualties because of the preparation we had.
Okay.
Which has to do with carrying out sensitization, getting people aware of the danger. And that is why, like I said, we have always been on red alert, and we're always ready at all time.
Okay. Well, let me ask. Yes, we'll come back to you, Mr. Mufai. Let me ask Mr. Adamu. One of the things that you definitely heard Mr. Mufai say there is that the last time such a thing happened was 10 years ago. It suggests that there are those who have also alleged that, hey, this is this kind of thing happens every decade. Is that something that we should begin to look out for, or do you think it's just a happenstance?
Well, these issues of flooding, like I said before, is a natural disaster, and it is not only peculiar to Nigeria. It is a global phenomenon as a result of climate change. If you look at the pattern of rainfall, it has changed significantly. Now we have torrential rainfall, very heavy rainfall over a very short period of time,
Mr. Adamu,
leading to
my apologies.
Massive
my
runoff.
My apologies for butting in. Climate changed a very long time ago. Here's my example. When I was in secondary school, Harmattan started late August into September. Today, sometimes Harmattan doesn't even start until after Christmas. Sometimes you don't even experience it on Christmas Day in December. So we saw this coming a long time ago, and so and same for the rain pattern, the pattern of rainfalls, the time it starts, the time it ends, the first rain, the latter rain, and all those things. Those things have changed a very long time ago. Would you say that it is time for us to begin to remodel our cities or replan the whole place, just so as to catch up with what we have and get ahead of what is to come?
Okay, let me give you the solutions from planning perspectives. And I can tell you that there is no way we can run away from planning. The first solution to this issue is a general mapping of all the flood-prone areas in Nigeria, by the relevant ministries. And these places can be gazetted. And when they are gazetted, because it's not all the places in Nigeria that are planned. That is the truth. In fact, we have an urban and regional planning law that is yet to be implemented by many state governments, not even talk about local governments. So there are many places that are not planned, and these natural disasters, they will come. In fact, this flooding has been predicted right from the beginning of the rainy season. The Nigerian meteorological agencies have been sending these warnings, and yeah, you cannot absolve the government of blame. The government leads the process. Even though Nigerians, we have a way of disobeying laws, but issues of natural disasters are not things to be toyed with, because they lead to serious, disastrous consequences of unimaginable proportion. You can see loss of lives, loss of habitats, loss of livelihoods, economic losses, and what have you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adamu.
So we have to go back to the drawing board.
To the drawing board.
We must go back to the drawing board.
Okay.
Yes, and do what is right.
Yes. Let me also believe that, that your members or town planners like yourself in the various ministries, departments, and agencies at federal, state, and local government levels, I will also take a cue from that. Let me quickly go back to Mr. Mafai before I return to Dr. Emudiage. So, Mr. Mafai, this is where we are now. How would you respond to the suggestion made by Mr. Adamuna about, should I say, replanning our cities to accommodate some of the vagaries that will surely come?
Yes, I think I agree with him. I agree with him totally. And like I told you that we have a bureau of lands, and we have a town planning board, in which I believe, together with the Ministry of Environment.
What then is likely to change?
Yes, I think there are mitigating things factors that can be put in place. One, if we can have the river dredged, it will go a long way by the federal government. And again, if we can have smaller dams that will serve as a retaining wall to the effect of this water coming in volume, I think it will equally go a long way. And the state government on its own is trying to ensure that we have what we call beach embankment, which is being built along the coastal area. For example, in Lokoja now, which is the metropolis, we have started the first phase. We are trying to see how the second phase could kick off. And so that by the time we have this embankment along the coastal area, the way water overflows to cover the road might be brought down to, a PRS minimum.
Okay.
And so by the time we put all this, though, my brother said just now that the last speaker, that it's a natural phenomenon. Yes, of course, a natural phenomenon. But you now discover that if we have a proper planning, it's not just the states now, but together with the federal government.
Okay.
By the time we put this mitigating efforts in place.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mafai. My apologies, we're running out of time. Let me take Dr. Mudiage. What's your take on the position of the commissioner and the suggestion of Mr. Adamu on, mitigating factors going forward?
Okay, thank you. I fully support what they said. I want to go back to the drawing board. And adding to what they have said, go back to redesign and all that. One thing that the hydrological agency, I'm sure they are giving government advice. I'm sure the Geoscience Society is giving government advice. Most times when they hold conferences, they come out with communique and say to the government, what has government done with all this community, all this advice that has been given to government? So government should go back to the drawing board and see how they can implement all the advice that they have been given.
But the function of government, my apologies, Dr. Mudiage, the function of government is one. The response of the people, the lining up with what government says by the people, especially in the various communities, as you mentioned. That's another thing altogether, going by what the commissioner said, isn't it?
Yes, but you know, my point is that if government is doing what they ought to do, the people will follow. They will obey. That is basic. They will obey if government is doing what they ought to do. If government brings a plan out and the plan is a workable plan, I'm sure everybody will follow.
But you also heard him that for a very long time they've been trying. Just a second. You also heard him say that for a very long time they've been trying to get people to comply with government positions, but they're not listening.
Because the government officials are not really carrying out what the duty they're supposed to carry out. That is it, because if somebody is influential and he doesn't want his or her house on the way to be removed, and maybe some exchanges take place, that house will remain. And somebody that does not have, is not influential, the house is being removed. So if the government is serious, all government officials are in, I would like to say that are concerned, that carrying that out, it should be total. That should be to work total, whether you are influential or not. Even if it's governor's house that is on the way, it should be removed. If it's the common man house that is on the way, it should be removed. So we should go back to the drawing board and do that, and be able to listen to the advice from the professionals also. That is very key.
Mr. Mafai,
because it's not only on the structures.
Yes.
No, there's what is called the subsurface flow of water. Apart from this, there is subsurface flow of water, which the Geoscience Society, the Additional Society has advised the government. So they should go back and listen to them, be able to implement that. And we, the citizens, also be able to obey what the government has put in place. For now, how well has the government put things in place? That is very key.
Okay.
Because a leader must lead. The government won't lead. It must lead with good examples. And when you see your government working, you think it's going well, people will fall in place. Okay.
Well, Mr. Mafai, I'd like you to respond to that, because there are those who believe that generally, governments at every level, it will seem like there are certain laws for certain people, and some laws are put in abeyance as a result, for certain people. Well, it's easy for, I expect you would say it's not true, but how do you respond to that? Because that's been the experience of so many people.
I just told you something now. I said a whole local government, like Ibaji now, for example, is underwater. Are we going to relocate everybody in Ibaji? Where ordinarily, the local government has its own land, a sizable land, and the whole place there is flooded. So are we moving all of them? But you see, I said something earlier. I said we should always look at the lasting solution. And this solution will always be, by the time we dredge this river, we'll get it right. By the time we build these dams to serve as retaining this water, the influx of water coming into the confluence, it will definitely, my brother, and together with just the solution, you see, the truth about it is this: some will always comply. No matter you tell some, they will never. Somebody you have gone to meet and tell, please move from where you are. The place you are is not safe for you. But he tells you, you meet a resistant that, no, this is where I have been, this is where my forefathers, this is my ancestral home, and so they cannot leave.
So then, that poses a challenge for government then, Mr. Mafai, because
that's what I'm saying. So,
yes.
So, but by the time we sit, just like I said, that I won't object to the earlier, that we should come to a round table. Honestly, that will go a long way.
So now that these areas are flooded and we are hoping that the water will abate over time, what happens to those areas? Are you still going to allow people return to their homes or lands or whatever it is? Or what's going to happen?
Yes. When His Excellency, my boss, Honorable Yaya Yunusa, was going around to at least to feel the pulse and to see the victims, the affected victims. He indeed iterated the fact that for the fact that in 2012 we were able to, after the 2012 destruction, we are able to build what is called a flood estate and hostels. Now again, the committee is working around, like I told you, we have a committee. The committee is working around on how to have more buildings, more estates built to accommodate this victim. Don't forget the fact that it's not something the state alone can do. And that is why we are crying out to federal, to even international donor. And
we'll come to those partnerships. Mr. Mafai, just a second. We'll come to those partnerships, but I'm just asking you because these areas are in Kogi State. There, as you said, it's in Lokoja. It happened right there in your state. When the floods abate, what is going to happen to those areas?
Yes, of course, like I told you that we have, we'll ensure that most of these areas, we will not allow people to go back. That I can assure you.
Okay.
In these areas. But by the time you go to the locals, the local government areas, honestly, like in Baji, for example, I keep saying it, or even Kogi Kutu, Karufi local government, you just discover that this has been their homes. You cannot completely remove Ibaji local government.
But as you said, it's underwater. Are they going to live underwater?
No, by the time water recedes, as it's beginning to now.
Where are those people now?
They are we have camps, IDP camps.
I mean, I don't know, Edward, because for what you're saying, anyway, let me ask Mr. Ogwande, what do you think? Because it definitely is a challenge for government.
It's no challenge. Government is just lazy. That place is their ancestral home. He keeps on saying it. Flood they didn't come and be staying inside that flooded environment. It was a dry land to them. So flood came because of development around. All they need to do is to study what causes flood and solve it. It's simple. It's as simple as I've said it.
But you just heard him say they are floodplains. They were floodplains.
We live in Lagos, and I just told you about the Ogunpa. You sit down and study the situation. What is the problem? And you solve it. It's a simple thing. Those people he's saying is ancestral home. Ancestral home, then it wasn't flood, it wasn't a flood-prone area. No, of course, even those who live in Ekeremo, I have been to almost everywhere in Nigeria, in the riverine area of Bayelsa, the backyard of Yenegua. Those places are floodplain. They have rafts, like if you are going on the third mainland bridge, they live on raft, except if he says that's what happens there. Even if it's that they live on raft, on flood, on river, then obviously if the river is now overflowing, there is a reason. Then that reason, you abate it. It's a simple thing.
You also heard Mr. Adamu say that the times have changed.
Times have changed. Even it has not changed. Let me land.
Of water. That's because their glaciers are melting, raising the water level all over the world.
My brothers and all those who are listening, when I was 10, 20 years ago, you know that we have rain for 7 days, heavy rain, 7 days, sometimes 14 days, sometimes 21 days, non-stop. This year, we didn't have up to 7 days non-stop, maybe 3, 4, 5 days.
But those 7-day rains are not torrential. They are not torrential.
Rain that brings out ice.
They are not torrential. They are not so heavy.
They are not so heavy. Okay, I rest my case.
Just a second. Because you heard what Mr. Adamu said earlier.
Yeah.
That, for instance, a climate change advocate who came on one of our programs earlier in the week said, hey, rain that was supposed to fall for 24 hours, for 7 days, fell in 48 hours.
Okay.
Most certainly, I mean, it's like water that is supposed to pass through your sink.
Okay.
You know, a cup of water, and then you put a basin of water. That's what he's talking about.
I rest my case. You know, I don't argue too much, though my business is to argue. What I will tell you is that we know that there will be flooding. Do we agree on that? If there will be flooding, then how do we cope? Based on the situation has changed, based on the fact that their infrastructure, their development, people are taking advantage of the situation, and our officers who are government people that we have trusted to arrest the situation have compromised. What are we to do?
Mr. Adamu,
Haba.
So you've heard the commissioner and you've heard arguments back and forth. What's your take on all of these? What are we missing from the urban planning angle?
Thank you very much, sir. What we are missing, basically, is nothing but, lack of adherence to planning. Like I said, we want to solve these problems. Let us go back to the drawing board. I've heard the commissioner talking about Ibaje very unfortunate situation. And this is the impact of climate change that we have been talking about all this while. Those people is their ancestral homes. They have been living there. There were no flooding. But now the elements have changed. Their places have now become flooded. They were not used to it. Now the beauty of planning is that we'll be able to isolate different places and apply different methods, different principles, different solutions. In the end, town planners will be able to provide a sustainable solution to end, at least to bring it to the barest minimum. We are not saying everybody must relocate. There are places, that you can rechannel. There are places you can densify developments and put people in safer areas. There are places that, there is no way. Some people must leave some places. It is not about their ancestral homes, and it's about human lives. It's about economic loss. It's about loss of investments and everything that has to come with it. And let me say that, preparing the plan alone is not enough. The government must put adequate resources into planning and implementation. Because when you plan and you did not implement, that plan just remains on paper.
Okay.
So the government, and it requires huge amount of resources. You can imagine the number of tributaries, the number of rivers running across the country. And we should be thanking God that we do not even have other types of flooding, like in other countries, like the hurricanes, coastal flooding, and these things that will come from the sea. This is flooding as a result of inland waters running into the rivers from the tributaries, and is largely caused by torrential rainfalls due to climate change.
Okay.
The government has come out to say it's not even about the dam. And if we now put other factors together, the way we live our lives in Nigeria, even environmental sanitation can cause flooding. You see people dump things anywhere. You see somebody wants to build a house. He will now come and dump sand, dump stone on the drainage.
Well, thank you, Mr. Adam. Let me ask. Yes, let me ask, Madam Dr. Mudiage.
The Prof.
Speak to us about the self-help default that we always go into. It is sure floodings will come as a result of climate change. Quantum of water has increased in our world because glaciers are melting. Huge ice blocks are melting into the sea, raising the water levels. It is natural for people to defer to self-help. What would be your own suggestion to people who have, relatives in various communities? I was speaking with a friend this morning who said that his own place in the South has also been flooded. So what would you say to people in the various communities and people who know and have people in these various communities in the hinterlands? What should we be doing to protect ourselves?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. So to protect people in the hinterland, they have to go back there. At least, how would I put it now? There's something, a proactive measure on time. But for me, I would go for a lasting solution. You have to think of a lasting solution. For peradventure, this kind of flood comes again, we have to plan ahead of time. We have to relocate ahead of time. Because right now, what most communities are experiencing is that maybe inside the community, part of the community is still upland, but the access to the community, all is flooded, they can't even come out. You can't come out, you can't go in. So they need to plan on time and relocate on time. But if we can put it in place that this flood doesn't have this adverse effect, and even if there's flood, it's very minimal, it's better. Then in those places too, at least the advice that when you are buying a property or a land, get those ones that are in the upland. not in the water alone, because most times we like the environment, people doing a lot of feeling to build houses. And at the end of the day, those houses are causing obstruction.
Well, madam, just one last one for you. You heard the commissioner speak about the sentiments that people attach to their ancestral homes, and you heard everyone else speak to that sentiment as well. But then these ancestral homes are endangered because of the climate change issues. What would be your recommendations?
My recommendation is that government should go back and build it down, because there are dams that are pending since 1981 till now, they are not completed. Like the director of Ministry of Water Resources, or the minister that said that, okay, it was abandoned in 2016 because of not having a good design and funding. So they should go back and complete all those dams and build even more and dredge the river Benue River, Niger, dredge all those rivers, deal with tributaries, and be able to get a good advice of completing water flow. I think if they put all those in place,
okay,
so this will have a permanent solution. I mean, even if there's climate change and flood is taking place, it will not be this bad.
Okay.
We should look for permanent solution.
Yes.
Because I bet you one thing is that, like now, we expect for 2012. We are expecting the year 2022. If you give us another 10 years, the way I know this country to be, we expect it for the day. Nothing will be done.
Okay.
All right.
Let me just say, God forbid. But thank you so much for your contributions this morning.
Planning, not God forbid, planning, we need to plan.
Most certainly, we have to do what we have to do. Associate Professor, Federal University of Petroleum Resources, Efron in Delta State, Juliet Emudiange, thank you so much. As well as Town Planner Sonny Adamu, who is an environmentalist, along with Victor Mofaye, Commissioner for Environment in Kogi State, as well as Wale Ogwade, human rights activist. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your contributions this morning.
To God be the glory.
When we return from this break, when we return from this break, it's time to take on another issue altogether. Do stay with us.